Hey everybody, welcome to the Green Room for DisrupTV. Of course, this is where we actually introduce our guests, and of course in reverse order, and of course we welcome you to the show. I've got Elle, our awesome producer, Vala, co-founder, and of course co-star here at the DisrupTV, and of course we've got our amazing guests. We introduce this in reverse order, so we'll start with Ravin, and we'll start with you, and then yeah, what are we talking about today? Where are we coming in from? So.
Lovely to be here with you guys, coming in from Chicago, and we're going to talk about this evolution of work from jobs as the singular currency for work to increasingly skills being the currency of a more machine-augmented world.
That's great, especially given the talk that we're talking about agentic AI and skills. They all come together. Machine and humans are coming together. Very cool. Kirstie, where are you coming in from? What are we talking about today?
Hey, so I'm a little further away. I'm originally from Scotland, but I'm calling in today from London. So it's cold, it's Friday night, and I'm really happy to be here.
Talking about today.
Hey,
well, we're happy to have you here. So thank you for being on the show. So, okay. All right, well, that's great. Well, with that, we're going to kick off. And of course, we're on this journey to get to how many people do we have on the show so far? Vala, or you tell us that? Is that a secret?
1,300 interviews.
All right, we'll reveal. All right, well, let's kick it off. All right, all back to you, Elle, for the count.
All right, 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us on DisrupTV. My name is Vala Afshar. I'm the Chief Evangelist at Salesforce and your co-host for the next hour. It's my pleasure to introduce my co-host, Ray Wang. He's the CEO and founder of Constellation Research. He's the best-selling author of Everybody Wants to Rule the World. I see Ray on TV, I think daily. Fox Business, Yahoo Finance, CNBC, Bloomberg. He's everywhere. And in my humble opinion, he's one of the top futurists to follow on X at RWANG0. Welcome, Ray Wang, to DisrupTV.
Hey, thanks a lot. I'm here with Vala Afshar. He's the Chief Digital Evangelist for Salesforce, but he's also the author of multiple books, including Boundless, a new mindset for unlimited business success, and a #1 seller on Amazon. But more importantly, executives around the world pay attention to every one of his inspirational and insightful tweets. And when he's not leading events or speaking at other events at Salesforce, you can find him speaking on business TV outlets such as Bloomberg and posting insightful analyses on ZDNet in his really well-read column. But it's not about us. It's about our amazing guests. And of course, who do we have to kick it off today?
We have an amazing guest who's missing supper to join us. Kirstie Papworth, author of Compassionate Leadership. This is exactly the time we should be talking about compassionate leadership. Kirstie is a psychologist and executive behavioral change coach with a particular interest in organizational leadership and compassion. Kirstie is a current executive director of experiential learning at London Business School and is founder of Tangerine Thistle, successful change consultancy, which specializes in behavioral change and leadership development. Kirstie has also delivered leadership development interviews for organizations such as Henley Business School, Crate Brewery, Infor, and many others. She's a TEDx speaker. She's delivered keynote speaker with delivering speeches and events on compassionate leadership for professional development groups, various organizations and companies. Her book has been shortlisted in a leadership category for the Goody Book Awards and Business Book Awards 2024. Welcome, Kirstie, to DisrupTV.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. And what a week to talk about compassionate leadership, right?
This is
Nothing happened this week. I mean, come on, what are you talking about?
If there's a time that we need to talk about, this is the time. Yes,
For sure.
No, compassion is weak. You know that, Kirstie. Isn't compassion weak, right? Don't we want strong, rational leaders? People love strong men. Come on. The results show it. What are you talking about? You must be misled, Kirstie.
You can't tease me like this. No, I mean,
on a serious note, I mean, what is with compassionate leaders, right? Is that a property, an attribute that people are looking for? Isn't compassion weak? I'll take you. I'll challenge you here on this. So.
I was going to say, just start where you mean to
yeah. How about
don't break me in gently. No, look, it's a great question, and a lot of people think that compassion is weak. It's often seen as a byword for weak leadership. It's people are a bit soft, knit your own granola, that kind of thing. But actually, that's not true. First of all, there is so much research now that shows that compassionate leaders actually is a huge source of strength. People who think that their organization is compassionate are more likely to want to stay. They're more likely to work harder. They're less likely to be absent. They're more likely to do all those little pro-social things that people do between each other that is never in a job specification, but it's the stuff that makes work bearable. So that there's a lot of this. There's also a strong correlation. A lot of my own research showed a strong correlation in what is usually termed employee engagement. So if you want your teams to stay and to love their work, it's not about yoga classes and fruit bowls and dress down Fridays. It's about them knowing that when they are struggling, when they are suffering, that they will receive a genuinely compassionate response. And I actually think it's this idea that compassion is weak in leadership. It actually takes courage to be a compassionate leader, particularly when, let's just say, some of the prevailing cultural narrative is perhaps not heading that way. It takes courage, it takes understanding, and it takes an amount of vulnerability to be able to say, no, hang on, I'm not just going to go with being tough and mean and brutal.
But Kirstie, you're not just talking about this, right? You are pulling from research and psychology and neuropsychology and behavioral science to show this, right? This is not like just your opinion.
Yeah, and actually it's part of the reason why I wrote the book, because I did 2 of my master's degrees where my research and dissertations was about compassion. One was about compassion in organizations, and one was about self-compassion in leaders and the difference that makes to stress, anxiety, and depression. But when I was looking for books on it and to read more about it, I found a lot of things that were opinion and kind of, what I would call the war stories. And then I could find textbooks and I could find research papers, but I couldn't find something that was based in research, but was really practical. So I ended up writing it myself.
So this is evidence-based.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not just my research. It's research of people like Jane Dutton, Monica Worline in the US, people like Richie Davison, who's a neuroscientist who's done lots of work on compassion. He works with people like His Holiness the Dalai Lama on compassion and what happens to the brain. So yeah, it's based in research, and then I've added my own in there, and I've added my 2 cents on top of the shoulders of giants, if you like.
Terrific. How did your research converge to the word compassion? If I had a Venn diagram with the word empathy and a circle that was kindness and a circle that was compassion, what's the intersection of all these words we use to show a leader that cares more about others than themselves? I mean, I don't know how to paraphrase being compassionate, but what does that word mean to you?
It's a really lovely question, Vala. Compassion in a nutshell is a response to suffering. Okay, so kindness, I can be kind to you, Vala, if it's your birthday and I bring you a chocolate cake. That's me being kind.
I love that. Chocolate cake. You had me at hello.
I was going to say, now I know how to get you to ask me nice questions. But kindness isn't a response to suffering, right? So empathy and compassion are more related. There's more of an overlap between them on that Venn diagram. So empathy is where we notice that someone is suffering in some way or another, and we feel an emotional response to that. So that's empathy. And then you take empathy and you add an action, and that's compassion. So empathy plus action is compassion, if you like. So compassion is this noticing someone suffering, feeling a response to it, but then doing something about it. And that's not just me being picky about words and wanting us to use certain words. Our brains can tell the difference as well. There's some amazing neuroscientists, Singer and Klemecki, if I put my teeth in, and they've done some work where they put people in an fMRI scanner, which basically just looks at minuscule changes in the blood flow in your brain. And they put people in an empathy condition, and then they put them in a compassion condition. And it's slightly different parts of our brain that are being used. It's fascinating. And the parts of the brain that are being used when we're in a compassion condition, they are associated with, they're the same parts of the brain that light up when we're experiencing joy or love or happiness, or probably your chocolate cake, Val. So our brains know the difference between compassion and empathy as well.
There's definitely fireworks going on in my brain when somebody puts a piece of chocolate cake in front of me. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. I think I'm just hungry.
Well, you should be. It's dinner time for you.
It's
Traveling in from London. Come on. It's thank you. Thank you again.
Well, this is interesting, right? So we know this is happening, but when we look at all literature, back to your evidence-based point, traditionally personalities are fixed, right? So how do you teach this, right? I mean, aren't we just either compassionate or totally not, or psychotic? Who knows?
Not mention any names. Again, nice question. So a lot of personality work, a lot of psychometrics work on an assumption that our personality is fixed. But that research is really being challenged a lot recently. People are saying, actually, maybe they're not quite as fixed. As we get older, as events happen to us, things change in our life. And many of your listeners and viewers, I'm sure, know about neuroplasticity, this idea that we can actually, through our patterns of behavior and thinking, we can actually change not just how we think, but the structure of our brain. So I think the idea that we're fixed has become a little outdated. And to the point of, can you teach it? Well, Richie Davison, again, the neuroscientist, he's shown that babies as young as 6 months old, when they see puppets that are behaving, in beautiful studies, they see puppets behaving in certain ways, they spend longer looking at the ones who act more compassionately towards other puppets than the ones who are beating puppets over the heads of Punch and Judy style. So he's actually arguing that we are born compassionate. And I would say that as a social species, I don't see how we would survive if we weren't a compassionate species. Because if you're a baby and you're crying and you're suffering because you don't have any milk, if someone doesn't respond to that, you're literally not going to survive. So as a species, we have to be compassionate and look out for each other. I think it's that life and the situations we've created as humans as we get older has somewhat obscured and maybe dented our compassion a bit. So it's less about teaching compassion, perhaps. It's more about rediscovering it. And actually,
so we could be jaded. You're saying we could be jaded or less sensitive to being compassionate. So
yeah. And there's some lovely research by Professor Paul Gilbert in the UK. He is a clinical psychologist, and he's actually found that when you teach people how to be compassionate towards themselves, we all know that helps anybody with resilience and how you feel about yourself and your stress, anxiety, and depression measures. But he's found that people who are actually who avoid compassion, who are almost scared of it, who the ones who would probably say, "Oh, it's weak and it's for softies and we don't want it," they actually benefit disproportionately. They benefit even more than the people who are interested in it.
This is Paul from the Compassionate Mind Foundation, right?
Exactly.
Yes.
I'm an immigrant refugee, and I left my birth country at age 10, so young enough to recognize the disruption. Didn't speak the language, didn't wear the same clothes, didn't play the same sports, didn't eat the same food. So everything was just immediate struggle, but at the same time recognizing I left a very dangerous place where my family and friends were dying. And because of that, I feel, I'm not sure if I'm more compassionate, but I know that I'm more tolerant, I'm more accepting, I'm more appreciative. I have zero sense of entitlement. I don't think the world owes me anything. You have to fight for your happiness. So do you feel like it's easier to teach someone when, one, they're self-aware, and they understand and appreciate what they have now. But also there's a level of attunement where they're not using influence or authority to help someone while they're struggling. They actually are very capable of sensing signals that demonstrate potential distress, and then they roll up their sleeves, get in the game, and try to help as much as they could.
Yeah.
Do you have to experience something difficult in your life in order to be compassionate?
That's an interesting question. I often, when I run talks or do workshops on compassion, I will often say, so hands up who's ever suffered. And there's never been a time that nobody has put the hand up, because the human condition in a way is that we all suffer to a greater or lesser extent. You know, the example you give, Vala, is a great extent. I would say that's trauma. People have individual trauma. You know, sometimes people suffer because they would say suffering is a migraine or a headache. So we all suffer in different ways and different times. There's a lovely Buddhist parable of a woman who goes and her baby dies, and she goes to the monk and says, "Can you please bring him back to life?" And the monk says, "Sure, but you have to bring me a mustard seed from the house of the person who's not suffered." And of course, she goes around all the houses and everybody suffers. So I do think there's something that we all suffer in very different ways at different times. We may not recognize it. There is something about, as we grow up, the attachment we have to our primary caregivers will also help about that's where we're taught how suffering will be treated. So you can also have that. But there's also the notion of the wounded healer. It would be very difficult for me, for example, to do my psychology work or my compassion work or my coaching work if I had never experienced any difficulty, because I wouldn't be able to empathize. Right. So, and I also think if you think about people who are amazing, compassionate role models, if you like, people like Gandhi or Mother Teresa or Martin Luther King Jr., all of them had in their upbringing, their childhood, I would say a fairly significant amount of trauma and difficulty. So there is something, I have a hunch, it's an unproven hypothesis that what you're saying is right, that almost people who have suffered more might find it easier to understand it. I would, if I'm allowed to, just add a slight health warning though, which is when we move from empathy and we add action, we go into compassion, right? But if we overdo any strength, what is it Superman says, any strength overplayed is a weakness. If we overdo that compassion and we're always rushing in to support other people and help and everything else, that tips into altruism. And altruism is where we look after other people even when it's to our own detriment. And a lot of what I talk about in the model in the book is knowing where you are in that model, knowing what your preferences, your behavioral preferences are, and then working out how do you actually resource yourself and resource other people. It's a balance. It's a delicate dance. It's a balance.
Yeah. Sorry, I want to follow up because you know, when I hear like difficult decision, anytime I hear that, I know someone's going to win, someone's going to lose, and that's what makes it difficult. And today in business, certainly the last 2-3 years, leaders have had to make very difficult decisions, namely restructuring companies, and it affects your livelihood, how you pay your tuition, your mortgage, your food on the table. You know, so can you make these difficult decisions and do it so that people recognize that there's a compassionate approach to it, even though some portion of the population will have very difficulty as a result of it? So how do you coach leaders to start that journey of making that difficult decisions, but communicate in a way that's radically transparent, that's inclusive, that's doesn't have hidden agendas? Like, how do you make those difficult decisions and stay compassionate at the same time?
Yeah. So you kindly shared, Vala, about some of your background. I'll give you perhaps a little bit of insight into my journey in compassion as well. If I go back sort of 15 years or so, I was running a fairly large department in an organization, and I had to make a lot of people redundant. And I was really struggling with my conscience and saying, well, if I'm trying to practice compassion and I'm trying to be a good, compassionate person, how can I do this? Yeah. And I think I realized, and it sounds a little bit trite, but it's not meant to be, that there's what we do and there's how we do it.
Right.
And about 3 or 4 years after this, my role was made redundant. So I was actually, and I wasn't treated particularly well, to put it mildly. But the thing that was really interesting for me was that the second person to phone me when my role's redundancy was announced was someone that I'd made redundant 3 years earlier.
Wow.
And that for me was, and I'm not telling you this to go like, oh, aren't I great? I'm kind of, there was a real insight for me there that I had assumed this person was still very angry with me. And she said, no, I understood what you had to do. But you can treat people with compassion all the time, I believe. And compassion isn't always soft. It can sometimes be, it can be tough, right?
Yeah.
Two soldiers who've just seen some of their comrades die are going to show each other compassion. And I wouldn't call them soft. I would say that there's a toughness to compassion as well. It's not tipping into altruism and sort of diluting. But yeah, I do think that there's what you do and how you do it. But I think there's also an important consideration about intention. So as an outsider looking into the US, I have found the last few months worrying, but also quite fascinating, because regardless of your politics and what you believe, and putting all of party divisions aside, you could argue that where people feel that their suffering has been seen and that someone is saying that they're going to do something about that suffering, well, that's compassion, right? That's what we've said.
Right.
That's what people might have been responding to in the elections this week.
I
So
think you're
it's
absolutely
about intention
right.
and thinking about the intention behind why you're doing it.
Yeah,
the car is ultimately neutral, but if you drive it into people, you're using something that's neutral for a difficult purpose. So it's thinking about your intention.
Let's say I'm sold and I buy it, and how do you get started, and where do you put this into the business?
By the way, Ray is one of the most compassionate people I know. He's
Just having fun.
I love the tough questions he asks. Let's say
I'm trying to keep it fresh. So,
well, I mean, obviously, Ray, the first thing I would say is you must buy my book, because that's going to tell you what to do, right?
Yes.
And actually, before I give you my sort of longer answer about what I think you should do, the thing about the book, it's only been out for about a year, and I have been, I don't know about you guys when you publish, but publishing your first book, you have this moment of, is everyone going to hate this? Is this going to tank? Am I going to get a lot of criticism? You sort of have this real moment of why did I put my head above the parapet? And actually, more than the book sales and the awards and everything else, the thing that I love is when people I've never met contact me and go, this is the difference it made, right? So I do think that we can make a difference in people's lives.
Yep.
If you were to say, right, okay, starting tomorrow, Ray's going to be, a compassionate leader, I would say three things. I would say, start by understanding what compassion really is. So we've kind of talked about it's not empathy and it's not altruism. It's that lovely point in the middle. I would then say, think about your patterns of behavior. So do you tend towards empathy, sitting back and going, oh, that must be awful, but not doing anything? Or are you kind of exhausted at the end of the day because you've spent all your time trying to help other people and you're tending towards altruism? So think about your preferences. And in the book, I talk about other behavioral patterns like transaction analysis, parent, adult, child ego states, and victim versus rescuer and stuff like that. So think about your preferences. And then the third thing I'd actually say is just remember it's a practice. Like, nobody is ever completely compassionate. I can tell you, if you write a book called Compassionate Leadership and you have teenage children, they will remind you anytime you are not compassionate. Kind of be gentle on yourself and remind yourself that it is just a practice. And the more we practice, go back to the neuroscience, that neuroplasticity, it means that we'll be making deeper paths in our brains, and hopefully we'll be creating a more compassionate world. Because back to what we said at the start, I think that might be quite important.
That's awesome. My final question to you, I imagine when you're writing a book about being compassionate, you may have thought about people in your life that embody compassionate leadership. Maybe it's parents, maybe it's siblings, maybe it's a former boss. Were you writing to them? Why did you write the book? And as you were writing it, was there someone you were thinking about that had an impact on your life in a positive way?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote the book because it's the book I couldn't find. But one of the things that I say in the acknowledgements, and I mean it, is I learned through compassion both by its presence and its absence. because if my life had just been constantly surrounded by compassion and people being there for me and compassionate, I wouldn't know what it feels like to not receive it, and therefore I wouldn't be able to understand other people. So bizarrely, I'm actually grateful to both. I'm grateful to the people who've made my life difficult in a strange way, and that is in a way, that's a compassion practice. When you start by being self-compassionate, and it's kind of easy to be compassionate to people you love. It's easy in a way to be compassionate to people you've never met. You say, oh, that looks like a terrible situation. As you extend those circles of compassion, which is something that Einstein wrote a letter to a friend about, he wrote about extending circles of compassion. And if you can extend it to people, actually, nobody's all bad, and you start to think about what might be driving their behavior, it gives you a different view in the world, and it helps. But yeah, I had some particular people in mind, both positive perhaps and less so. And I was very supported. I was very lucky. I had mentors and
awesome.
And people who would help me as well.
Next time you're on the show, will you play a piano for us?
I don't think you'd want to hear that, but I'll try.
We would. Ray is classically trained, so Ray
and you can
be
sing
the judge.
And I'll dance.
He'll be
no, I want to be the judge of that. I'll be compassionate. We're here with Kirstie Papworth, author, Compassionate Leadership. Thank you so much for being here, especially during mealtime. Appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me. I was very grateful.
Have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.
I feel bad because Kirstie's missing dinner. Hopefully the conversation was worth it. Maybe got her appetite going.
She's hungrier now than she was before.
Absolutely.
That's what we gotta do.
Well, as we always do, we typically bring a guest that just expands our minds. And we have one of the top futurists in the world here with us now, Ravin Jesuthasan, co-author of a new book, The Skills-Powered Organization, The Journey to the Next Generation Enterprise. What a timely conversation. Given this new world of AI we're in. Ravin, a recognized futurist and authority on the future of work, human capital, and AI, is a senior partner and global leader for transformation services at Mercer. Ravin is a member of the World Economic Forum's Future Skills Executive Board and Global Foresight Network. He's the author of the Wall Street Journal bestseller Work Without Jobs, as well as Transformative HR, Lead the Work, and Reinventing Jobs. Ravin was advisor to featured prominently on PBS, a highly acclaimed documentary series called Future of Work. Ravin has been recognized as one of the top 8 Future of Work influences by Tech News, one of the top 100 HR influences by HR executives, and is named the Thinkers 50 radar class on all these incredible topics we've said. Welcome, Ravin, to DisrupTV.
Thank you, Vala. Thank you, Ray. It's lovely to be here with you.
Terrific.
Hey, we're excited to have you here, and this is one of the hottest topics out there. And when you talk about where skills are headed, where organizations are moving in this direction, according to companies, big tech companies, that the technical skills have a shorter and shorter lifespan, and we see that everywhere. It might be 2.5 years, might be 2 years. Some things are down to 1 year. So how can leaders make up skilling efforts, especially when you don't know what's hot and what's going to make demand? So pretty challenging area to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been really fascinating, Ray, to see how rapidly these skill premiums are shifting, right? And if you think about what's driving them, it's obviously AI, machine learning, and Gen AI that are rapidly rendering some skills obsolete, augmenting others, demanding others. The climate crisis, interestingly, we're seeing is really affecting many skills on the manufacturing side of things, with logistics, in the energy sector, with municipalities. If you think of the responses to the 2 hurricanes in Florida and the new skills being asked for to respond to those issues. But what's interesting to your point about how do you make skill development a core part of the strategy? And I want to just share an anecdote that was the basis for the collaboration with my co-author, Tanuj Kapila-Shrami, who's the Chief Strategy and Chief People Officer at Standard Chartered Bank. She showed her board a couple of years ago that they could save, as their business was pivoting to be the bank that financed the transition to net zero, that they could save 50,000 British pounds per employee by reskilling talent from the sunset roles to the sunrise roles, as they called it. And that made this imperative around skill development not just something that HR people did, right? Not something that you did when you had budget, something that you cut when you were having a crummy year, but actually became a board level imperative. And it became a key part of their strategic plan, just like the capital plan was part of the strategy. So this idea of transitioning the workforce en masse from a legacy state to a future state was part of the strategic plan. And in the book, we talk about the three core capabilities of organizations who are doing this well. The first one, to your very question about how do you know what's coming next?
Yeah.
This notion of understanding the demand signals for work, understanding the supply of skills and capabilities, understanding the gaps you need to close, what we call work design, right? And understanding where AI will substitute or augment, et cetera, being the first capability. The second being then the translation of those gaps that need to be closed into skill development as a priority. And the beauty of this today is, Vala, you've been with Salesforce. Think of all the great resources that Salesforce has put out to, communities around the world to close technical skills gaps. Microsoft's done the same thing. Google's done the same thing. And, being able to develop these skills at scale and speed is more of these resources are more available now than ever before. And then the third key capability is because you never want to do development just for the sake of development, right? As good a thing as that is, how do we ensure we're deploying those skills back to work productively and quickly and scalably? So three core capabilities to address this challenge.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning the work we're doing. We have 23 million active learners on our skills-based platform called Trailhead. And it's going to create millions of jobs and contribute billions of dollars to GDP. So the divide that exists that's widening, it's due to lack of investments, frankly, in upskilling, reskilling our employees. And it goes back to high school and college. I feel like there's a major opportunity to disrupt what we're teaching students in universities, undergraduate and graduate. I think about the fact that a year from now, when you come back on our show, I will be telling you that my company will have 1 billion plus active agentic AI operating across our ecosystem, 1 billion plus. And I think that's a conservative number, given the number of clients we have who are aggressively investing in hyper automation. And part of that is decomposing the work to be done, the job to be done in sales, service, marketing, commerce, wherever you are in business, to a decomposable way where, what is the topic? What is the job to be done? What are the instructions you need to feed the smart software? And what are the actions that the software can take? So the guardrails that are needed. And this is going to create machine scale outcomes. So what type of skills, and it's not degrees, and you've said this, it's not degrees or job titles. This is precision, precision at a scale that we've never experienced in humanity, in my opinion. And so there's a different set of skills we're going to need to do this. Why is this so important in a where it's a new world? This isn't a new technology. This is a new world. I try to convey a certain sense of urgency when I'm with business leaders that in my 30 years of tech, I have never experienced technology as impactful as this. So why do skills matter so much now than before?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that are driving this, right? One is just the sheer velocity and volatility of change that you've alluded to, Vala, is off the charts, right? I have the privilege of being at the World Economic Forum meetings in Davos. Sam Altman was there, and, this might have been a little overstated, but I think that the sentiment was right, because he said, the velocity and volatility of change today is exponentially greater and has never been paralleled in human history. And then 2 months later, the IMF came out with their uncertainty index and showed that this level of uncertainty was 2.5 times, not 2.5%, but 2.5x the historical 30-year average. Wow. And so what you're seeing is just the sheer pace of this change And if you think of what Gen AI is doing, right, it has absolutely permeated every facet of work. In my organization, we've had our own large language model for a couple of years. All of the work we do is absolutely machine augmented. There's no consulting work that's starting with a blank sheet of paper, right? There is a 30 to 50 to 70% solution that is then absolutely customized, right, for the unique problem, circumstances. And that's where the point you made, Vala, is a really, really important one, because so much of leadership today has been built on, I build an organization every time new work emerges. I'm really good at this muscle of opening a new requisition for my HR people to go out and hire someone. We're seeing this pivot to saying work design absolutely needs to be that capability. The capability to do three things: to take that emerging work, deconstruct it into its key elements and tasks, and understand the skills required, understand the options I have for redeploying that work. Should I push something to RPA, robotic process automation? Should I use Gen AI to augment the work that the person is doing today? Should I shift the work to a global capability center in India or the Philippines? And then how do I reconstruct new and arguably more impactful jobs? And the reason why we're seeing degrees really fall by the wayside is, and again, you're like, the work Salesforce is doing is like the poster child for this, is because this level of volatility and change requires much smaller building blocks for work, building blocks that I can pull apart, recombine as the demand changes. That's where the deconstruction of work to the elemental tasks and skills, gets you there, as opposed to this blunt instrument of a degree matched to a job. So the transition is from those one-to-one relationships with degree matched to a person, matched to a position, to the many-to-many between skills and work, and the many different ways I can then adjust, to your point. As I introduce a billion more agentic agents, I'm going to shift skill premiums. If I know what people can do and I know their skills, I can rapidly redeploy them. I can close those skill gaps at scale and speed. And it's where AI is both the trigger and the solution, right, for this, because AI is what's enabling this reskilling and redeployment at scale and speed.
Can I just, Ray, one more thing? Just when I hear the word work, work is pushing something a distant. I don't know if I'm the definition of work. When I think of it, it's like pushing something a distance, and that's energy and defines work. And when you push something a distance, there's effort and there's stress, depending on how heavy it is, how big it is, and how far you're pushing it. When I think of a machine-led, human-assisted world, not a human-led, machine-assisted, machines don't think effort and stress. So the future of work, if it's machine-led, human-assist, do we have to define work differently? Because the units of stress and effort kind of goes away. I mean, you got to invest in GPUs and the computing and storage, but it's not the same definition when it's humans doing it. Anyway, I'm sorry to just focus on the word work, but work to me is just being defined in so many ways in my mind. It's, sorry, there's not even a question there. I apologize. I hear
no, but actually,
I hear future of work.
Point though.
Yeah, I hear future of work, and I'm like, this is an effortless, frictionless, high-scale, machine-scale world. No. So this is why the ROI on investing in like agentic AI is so important for business leaders, because those dimensions of work definition go bye-bye. Anyway.
And Vala, you've made a really important point, because, and this is where the economics just completely changed, right? Because the old model of, if I wanted to increase efficiency, I could get to 2 or 3% by kind of making people work harder, shifting some things around. Some of the things we've shown organizations we work with, and there are some case studies in the book, we were able to get to a 600% gain in productivity by moving data scientists from a traditional job-based model to a more agile flow model with AI augmentation. We were able to get in a financial services organization, transform a processing organization with 5,000 people and actually free up 50% of the capacity
Wow.
by transforming the work. And that's the thing that to me is, I don't think people have even figured out
I agree.
how quantum these gains are. You know, we're starting just to see the tip of the iceberg. But the problem is, unless we have skills as the currency for work, we're going to keep bumping up into that high frictional cost model that you just talked about, where it's like, oh my gosh, it's the person in the job and I have to replace her with this machine. No, you know, there's
But
so
wait,
many different
but
ways.
wait,
to
what do we?
unleash
But wait, what do we do with the 4-year college degree then? Do we throw it out the window? Is Peter Thiel right? Do we get rid of all this? I mean,
That would save this parent $1 million. I've got 3
I know
kids.
we're in. We're in. Let's
You know,
just,
you and I know. Your boy
we
goes to Duke,
feel the
I
we
know.
feel the pain. So
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Unfortunately, mine have both gone through this. So, like,
Oh,
I'm figuring this out.
You're the wealthiest guy here. You're the richest guy here right now.
He was.
Yeah, I
He
don't have
was the
anyone
richest
on
guy.
payroll at the moment.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. He was the richest, I suppose.
He
you're
was the
right,
richest
yeah.
guy. So,
Yes, that's true. But no, this is where I do a fair bit of work with governments as well as academic institutions around the world. And increasingly, guys, the question is being asked from these legacy institutions, right? What is our purpose? Because the purpose is no longer to teach someone how to be a good engineer, right? Because you can absolutely get that done at a fraction of the cost and a fraction of the time on a bunch of other platforms. And the best part is that learning that you're going to get from Salesforce or anyone else is not just highly personalized, it's highly contextualized. So I'm not producing someone with a 4-year degree who has great theoretical knowledge. I'm producing someone in 6 months with practical hands-on knowledge that they can apply today, as opposed to needing to be onboarded and trained by the company. But what you're seeing are these 4-year institutions and others asking the question of, what is our purpose? And I'll share one anecdote with you with a university I've worked with in the Pacific region. The new president said, look, we're a world-class engineering school. No one is going to come here to keep learning engineering skills from us. What they're going to come here for over the next 10 to 15, over the next 20 years is they're going to come here to learn how to learn. They're going to come here to develop the critical thinking and the human skills that are going to keep them relevant for a rapidly changing world. They're going to come here for the network of people that they're going to be learning with, who are going to be their resources, their sponsors, their collaborators, once they go out into the world. And so it's everything except teaching someone technical skills.
Wow. So, who knew the hottest programming language now is English? So we've had Tom Peters on our show several times, In Search of Excellence. He's written 20 books. And he often reminds Ray and I that the soft skills are the hard skills and the hardest skills to develop. I mean, we just had Kirstie remind us of the importance of being compassionate. I'm not sure if I buy you can teach compassionate leadership. Maybe. I think it's those soft skills are very hard to teach.
The capacity.
Being self-aware, being humble, being these are things that are being self-motivated. In my life, I just find those are exceptionally hard skills to teach. What are the skills gaps that are gaining momentum, and how do leaders address those gaps within their organizations, given your ability to act as their trusted advisors, building a skilled organization?
Yeah. So I'll give you 2 points. One is you're absolutely right that the tougher stuff to develop are those human skills, the transferable skills, right? And that's what was inherent in that number at Standard Chartered Bank, that £50,000 per employee, was the recognition that, hey, we've got people who know how to get stuff done. They can think creatively and they can solve problems. They know how to work in our culture and our systems. And that stuff is a lot harder to teach. I can go teach them, Python. I can go teach them Julia. But those things I can teach in 6 months. Teaching them all these other capabilities is going to take 3 years. And that was at the heart of the experiment, was that when they hired someone from a competitor who had these great technical skills, it often took them 2 to 3 years to get fully productive. because they had to develop all of those the transferable skills. But that's also why in the book, we talk about the pace, again, that pace of change is so significant. And it kind of ties back to Kirstie's point about compassion, right? We have to stop saying, you know what, you're going to upskill on a Saturday evening at 10 o'clock when the kids are in bed, and actually intentionally designing in space for upskilling and reskilling in the flow of work. And I've got a number of clients right now who are, really compressing the learn-do cycle with the use of VR and AR and XR, particularly in physical environments where people are operating with stuff where, I don't have the tolerance to take someone off the line for 6 months to teach him or her something new, but I can do it for a couple of weeks, and then I can have their environment be totally machine augmented. So when they need help, when they need a nudge, when they are kind of moving off the rails, there is help being piped in. And I think that's really where you're going to see a ton of innovation, Vala and Ray, in terms of organizations putting in the resources to keep a workforce that is going to stay perpetually relevant by continuously reinventing itself.
I was just with the chief innovation officer of a healthcare provider serving 20 million customers, patients. And he said in our ecosystem, there's a term pajama time, where the physicians can only update their records when they get home after dinner. So they literally will say, I'm updating my records during pajama time. So it's now accepted that you have to do this on your own time at work in the evening. And he said, as a result of it, there's 25% less students participating in residencies to become physicians. A major decline in students going into the healthcare profession because they realize they're signing up for 16-hour workdays. And, and the reason I was talking with him is he was talking about the importance of automation, innovation, just being able to hear natural language discussion with a patient and doctor and scribe the takeaways that could minimize their pajama time. So they're excited about AI because they actually think they can go home and enjoy time with their family. So anyway, it's just what you mentioned about folks working in the evening to get things done. This is real, and it's fatigue and it's stress. And frankly, 1 in 4 less students, instead of proudly joining a profession where it's their life's work, like, Ray's wife is a physician who works 16-hour days, I suspect. Just trying to keep up with Ray, by the way. So, but you live it, Ray. How often does your wife work after dinner? Just keeping up records, it's
because she's not lazy. She's got grit. All these young doctors, they just don't have it.
Yeah, this is the
they
thing.
Just don't have
Society
it.
admires grit.
Society is so lazy. Everybody is too worried about work-life balance.
I forgot. You
all
and
those kind of things.
You and I are immigrants, so unless we
act, I think, like an immigrant.
Yeah.
So, but
makes 3 of us.
That makes sense. I suspected it was all 3, but
But there's an important point here, right? I mean, when I read the book and when I think through all the items here, it's really that we're back to the atomic level of skills, right? And you can't really transform an organization without understanding the atomic level of how these skills come together, what portfolio of skills you bring to the table. The way we design work for humans will also be the same way we design work for machines as we actually build these agents, right? And I think, to me, that's really fascinating, because agents are going to be able to do something different than what humans will be able to do in terms of bundling skill sets that traditionally wouldn't happen with a human. And the way human judgment works actually is very different as well, because we can only bring certain types of skills together. So that Venn diagram is going to be important. So with that in mind, what skills are going to be in demand for humans in the coming decade?
Great question. By the way, I get asked this question all the time. So Ravin, just know this Saturday, I'm going to be taking notes of your answer. I'm going to be borrowing from you. Everything is borrowed. I'm going to borrow from you. So
you'll be heavily attributed.
Yeah.
So I mentioned I do a lot of work with the World Economic Forum, and every other year they put out their Future of Jobs report. And it's actually a really thoughtful piece. And so for at the end of 2023, what came out from their analysis was, unsurprisingly, it was creative thinking, right? People who can solve problems creatively with data, etc. It was AI literacy, shocking, right? It was curiosity and the willingness to, and having the learning agility to sort of, take what I know in one domain and look for connections into other domains. So if I know finance, how do I apply the logic and the disciplines and science of finance to operations, to HR, to marketing, etc.? Do I have the curiosity to kind of look around corners and see what's coming next? The other big one was systems thinking, which I think is absolutely huge because, so many people, are really good linear limited thinkers, right? And struggle to see the consequences of choices, both, not just primary implication, but secondary and tertiary. The one area, and it comes back to the physician side of things, right? We did a bunch in my book, Work Without Jobs, which you guys mentioned.
Right.
And can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Yep.
Oh, okay. Sorry, things kind of blacked out on my end. But one of the things that they did was to say, for the nurses, how do we get them to flow to the top of their license? The things that they came into this organization that, what they're passionate about, what they really want to do. They don't want to be, you don't need to be an RN to take a temperature. You don't need to be an RN to turn over an intubated patient. So how do we pull these jobs apart and understand the things that are at the top of the license, as they were calling it, versus the things that are at the bottom of the license, where frankly, a lot of process automation and AI, as you described it, Vala, could be incredibly helpful in freeing that physician or that nurse up to do the stuff that they wanted to do, why they went to school for, right? As opposed to burdening them with all of these mundane activities that have just through inertia bubbled up.
I respected your work, and now I like you even more because you used flow twice in the interview, and I spent an entire book on flow optimization. So you and I are BFFs, and one of the Fs may be flow. My best flow friend. My last question to you, because ultimately we need to deliberately remove friction, and as long as we can deliver value at the speed of need, I think we're going to be relevant. And that's just about flow. And as athletes, we recognize when you're in a flow state, when the perfect shot, the perfect pass, rebound, assist, you're just, you left everything on the playing field and you feel good about it. And it's hard to get in the flow state in work. Like, I remember vividly being in a flow state when I was an athlete, and anyone watching probably can't imagine that I used the word athlete and me in a sentence. But I used to get into flow state, and it's harder because flow is all around us, and we as humans find creative ways of destroying it. Whether it's an email, a text, it's fear of missing out, whatever it is. Where I think I've got acute ADD that I got to deal with. Anyway, my last question to you: what do you hope readers get from your book? Like, when you wrote the book, and I know writing a book is difficult, and you're a best-selling author, so I'm sure it's easier for you than me and Ray, or at least me. What are you hoping your readers get from your book?
Yeah. So, Vala, as you guys, and Ray, as you guys know, this is my 6th book. With this book, I really wanted it to be a practitioner's guide. I partnered with someone who's just an extraordinary leader. She's both chief strategy and chief people officer. And so the work that she's done has been absolutely amazing. So what we've done with the book, as you will have seen, it's both the theory. Here's the big idea. Here's the theory. And then here's the art of the practice. Here's how you actually make this change happen. Because the truth is, guys, and you guys know this, every organization, we as a species have a 150-year legacy of work being done in jobs. So the change we're talking about is not easy, but there are some amazing organizations who have started on this journey and have started to achieve some of the gains that I talked about. And so we wanted this book to be about, how do you actually make this happen? How do you get started? How do you deal with bringing leaders along? How do you upskill your leaders? So it's really a book for people who want to make the change happen.
That's awesome.
This has been great. Yeah. No, this
And
is
the
going to
book
be a
came
book
out in
that's-
October. This is a new book. It just came out last month.
It came out in October, and I'm delighted to share it was on the FT's Book of the Month. So
awesome.
We were really thrilled with that.
It's doing really well on Amazon. I saw the ranking across different classes, and it's given the fact there's 50 million books on Amazon, and I saw where yours was ranking. I'm like, wow, this is an awesome book. So congratulations.
It's a hot book for humans and for agents.
Yes, exactly.
Ravin Jesuthasan, he's a 2020 Thinkers 50 co-author of The Skills Powered Organization, The Journey to the Next Generation Enterprise. You can follow him on X at Ravin, Jesuthasan. And he also definitely catch his book on Amazon. So thanks a lot for being on the show. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, guys. Such a pleasure.
Thank you. Big thinker. And has written a number of wildly successful books. I don't know how people write 6 books, Ray. How do they do it? It's just, they're so much smarter and more disciplined.
They're focused. They're definitely focused. Much more focused than we are.
I have such imposter syndrome when I have these amazing guests come here, drop their wisdom nuggets, make, right now there's smoke coming out of both of my ears. You can't tell.
Maybe compassion is a skill we need to focus on, actually.
So please recap the show in 30 seconds, if you would.
Yeah, I think it's really important. We're breaking down the myths in terms of what makes great leadership. You may have seen in the past, I wrote about dynamic leaders. Compassion was definitely one of the traits that people looked at. The question was, how can people turn compassion into an advantage when people might have a misconception that a compassionate leader is not strong, is not rational. And so we really learned as to how leaders are actually able to use compassion to motivate others, and more importantly, why that's an important skill. Ravin basically spent some time showing us at the skills level what's going to be important in that future of work. And if you really believe that the future of work is going to be based on all these new types of skills that are going to come together, and sometimes they might even seem like it's going to be a portfolio of skills that you accumulate over time, well, that is actually going to take us into what we talk about in the agentic world, where we're trying to identify logical work breakdown structures, right? Where you actually group skills together to actually get tasks done. And I think we're going to see that over time. So skills, tasks, the notion of work are all coming together, but it comes down to the atomic unit of what a skill is. And of course, for us to think about how we actually change the future of work in terms of the types of skills we train for, we actually build internally inside an organization, and more importantly, that we actually promote. And so I think it's as we get to more of that skills-based approach, kind of like, we interviewed some guests before in the past from Western Governors University as well. They took a very skills-based approach to their training and education. We're going to see more and more of that actually enter into our vernacular.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you for that recap. Next week, we have episode 382. We're inching our way to 400 episodes. And we have Ilyas Simpson, who's the former CEO of Modiv Care. And we have Payman Zamani, founder and CEO of One Planet Group and author of Crossing the Desert. So again, last year we had 70 authors on our show. We're on pace to break that 70 number this year. 2 authors this show, an author next week, and we've had numerous authors throughout the year. So thank you for recommending your favorite books to us. And, please continue to recommend authors. This is the best way to scale thinking and doing. And this is where authors come to share their work, and we're grateful for it. If it's Friday, it's DisrupTV. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next week. Bye, everyone.
All right. We'll see you guys in the green room.